recording, mostly for our own notes. So we've got everybody here, I think knows each other, but let's double check. Teresa, I'm not sure if you know everybody or if everybody knows you. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Teresa Carr, and I've been attending the Homelessness Council meetings for quite a long time on behalf of Senator Bill Dodd.
Great. Joe and Juno, how about if you all were introduce yourselves?
I'll jump in. I'm Joe Bruno, peer support specialist with Delta Peers, currently lived experience advisor seat on the Council for Homelessness. Or is it Council on Homelessness? I always get
Council,
that.
yes, Council on Homelessness.
Yeah, because it's COH, not CFH.
Yes.
Council on Homelessness.
Exactly. Today, we'll call it that today. How about you, Juno?
Hello, Juno Hedrick, Youth Action Council member and chair on the council. And apologies, I am a little bit under the weather today, so if I'm sound a little drowsy, I'm not sleeping through the meeting. It's just the meds.
I feel you. I am. Yep. Part of why I was home today is I'm recovering from a cold, and so is everybody in my house, and apparently so is my dog.
Oh,
we don't want to talk about the dog. The dog stayed home, so there's no bark anywhere outside the house. And Rachel just joined us. Rachel, do you mind introducing yourself?
Hello, I'm oh, sorry, hold on. Didn't get
no pressure. You show up how you need.
Sorry, can you hear me? I had taken my headset off. I was in the meeting for so long and I was like happy to be liberated.
Yes, no, you're here. We can hear you.
Okay, Rachel Rosekind, and I am here and I've loved being part of this effort. And is there a prompt we're supposed to respond to, or
no?
Okay,
just doing basic introductions today.
Okay, that's pretty basic, so I'll just leave it at that if that's okay.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to just share real quickly the drafted or the agenda. Hold on. I'm having challenges here. Wait, hold on one second. Oh, the minutes. So two things I want to show. You know what I'm going to do is just share my screen because that way it's going to be easier. So we've got, first of all, our agenda, which there we go. Nope. There we go. So today, our plan is to mostly the bulk of today is going to be reviewing the very drafty work plan that Jamie and I have been tinkering with behind the scenes and get that in a little more concrete shape. And we will also sort of talk next steps, like what do we, we'll see where we are at the end of this meeting about how much more we need to do at the December meeting. But mostly wanted to just do a quick, catch people up to what we've worked on so far, and then really dive deep into the work plan. And just to recap, we're creating a work plan because this group, the Equity Committee, has been formed and now has an official sort of North Star plan, goal for 2023. And so we're building a work plan to sort of make sure that we accomplish some of those goals by the end of next year. So I just wanted to do a quick recap of the minutes from last time. So I think I posted them with the materials. One of the things that I wanted to flag was we had asked people to just think between last time and this time, any goals that you may have come up or thought about since the last meeting, and we'll get to that, but the minutes are pretty basic. Any comments or questions or issues anybody had? And actually what I'm going to do right here is, just in case there's something that comes up, I'm going to make this the minutes. Any changes or edits that anybody wants to make to the minutes from last meeting?
I don't have any I don't have any questions other than, where did you post the stuff?
Oh, good question.
Jamie?
Yes. So I will actually show all of our meeting minutes and everything There's two ways that people find out about these meetings. Well, there may be a couple ways. So one is on Agenda Center. And Teresa, you may be familiar with Agenda Center. So we post all council related things. Sorry, I am having issues with my computer. Holy smokes. So Agenda Center is where we post basically all council meeting related things. And that is also the link that I use when I send out a constant contact email about any of our council meetings. When it says like, hey, the meeting's this day and time, you can register here. And then here's a link to the agenda and the materials. So these are all of the like advisory board meetings across the entire county, all the official advisory boards. We have our own little header. And you can see, so basically the format is like, it has the date of the meeting, the title of the meeting. And if you click on there, I always post ahead of the meeting, the agenda, if there's minutes from the last time, and then any materials. So hopefully you got an email. Actually, Teresa, that's a good question that you're bringing up, which is like, how did you hear about this meeting? How did you get this on your calendar?
Yeah, I pulled it up on something else that you had sent out.
Oh, okay.
I was on the last meeting, but it didn't have, excuse me, it didn't have, all the agenda and the things that you normally get. I normally get all that stuff when you're having your regular council meetings, but I just didn't know about this one.
Okay, so I'll make sure that you're
So now I
added.
know.
Yeah, but that's good to know. So one of the things I also do is like we have constant contact is the way that we send out all our emails. And so I have folks that have indicated they're interested in equity meetings. And so folks on that list will be getting, because a lot of people have said, we don't want to know about every meeting. Just tell me about the meetings I'm interested in. So if you haven't gotten on that list, then you wouldn't get the information like directly to your inbox. So I'm just making a note to add you to the Equity Committee mailing list. That's a very good question, Teresa.
Thank you. I guess I was on the first meeting, and then, because I have that confusion between the equity with the county, because I'm following that one also. And then now we have this equity one. So I'm like, well, why do we need two?
Yep. And so you raise another great question, which is like, what is the purpose of this meeting and how is it different from what's happening in health services, which is different from what's happening across the whole county? So we have like the Russian nesting doll, right, of equity work. And a lot of people are confused. And part of what we've tried to do as H3 or as the staff for the homeless continuum of care is make sure that we understand what's happening in those other realms. What I can tell you for our work in this group is that our sort of membrane, our barrier is that we're really just looking at equity within our homeless system of care. And within that, the group has decided on a very specific goal for what to focus on in the next year, just like within that boundary. Does that help clarify a little bit?
Well, some.
Yeah.
Some. I think there's still a lot that, and I'm sure that going forward, it's all going to come together. So I'm not concerned about that. I'm just trying to put all the pieces together.
Yeah.
Because the other one is so involved.
Yep.
So when I was looking at it, I'm thinking, okay, where does this group fit into this? And exactly what are these people going to be doing? And when is this going to really happen? And so that was just kind of my confusion. Sometimes too much information is not good.
I really understand. And I'm with you. I've been trying to track what's happening with the Office of Racial Equity and Justice at the county level. Contra Costa Health Services also kind of has their own initiative going. So you're not the only person confused and or working across multiple silos. So the good news is, and this is part of why I've been really excited for us to create a work plan, is that when somebody like you comes to us and says like, okay, so like, what exactly is this about? What are you guys doing? We could be like, look, here's our work plan. This is what we said we're going to do in a year. These are the things we're going to like have accomplished each quarter. And at the end of the year, this is how we're going to know that was like time and energy well spent. And I think a lot of folks that are working on equity are struggling with this same thing too, because it is massive. It crosses like every single piece of work we do, but we can't do all the things all at the same time. So the good news is this group at least has like a very clear North Star. Oh, and Rachel, I'm going to amplify what you say. Yep. One of the central goals of the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice, which is the county office, is to break down some of those silos. Yes. And so my hope, just related to that, is like, we're not all reinventing the wheel, right? So I am like a huge fan of like, let's look at best practice from other communities and see what they're doing and see if we can lift stuff from them instead of like reinventing a whole new brand new thing. So I'm hoping that there's going to be a lot of that happening with all of these sort of connected equity initiatives. But that was a really important question, Teresa. So the other piece I wanted to recap. So last meeting, we started talking about work plans. We started talking about SMARTY goals. And I think I'm going to try, sorry guys, I'm a little behind my game today. I'm going to try and pull, oh, here we have it. I'm going to pull up the description of a SMARTY goal so that we can re-ground ourselves in what that actually means. So hold please. So a SMARTY goal, basically it's like we want to make a goal that is as specific as possible, that also the inclusive and equitable piece means like we're also keeping not just like, can we measure it? Is it time bound? All these things that we usually think of when we're trying to set a good goal, but also how do we make sure that we're like being inclusive and holding equity, holding an equity lens. Aha, thank you. And Jamie Schechter is bringing up a link to the worksheet referenced on the slide. So and Jamie, feel free if you have a different
Can you
vision.
put that up one more time?
Yeah, let's let me just actually see what happens if we, here we go. I'm going to share my screen with this worksheet. Hold on. So this worksheet, this is, so basically making sure that something is strategic, right? So it's like, it's related to what we want to try to accomplish. It's measurable. And so this is a big one, right? It's not just like, yeah, we're going to make things better. Well, like by how much? Because if you don't have a measurable thing, then it's really hard to know if you've succeeded or if what you're trying to do is like having any impact. We want it to be ambitious, right? So we want to make it like enough of a stretch that there's some work involved, but we also want it to be realistic. So like, it would be very ambitious to say like, we're going to end homelessness in a year in Contra Costa. That is, the problem is that's not realistic, right? That's just like, so there's nobody is going to feel like there's any success. You want to do something that is like, actually, you're actually going to be able to accomplish, but not that's so easy that it's not worth doing. Time bound is really important. And the good thing is like, we have a clear guideline. Sorry, cold. I'm going to cough for a minute. Time bound. So some of the goals that we're going to propose are going to be like bound within a quarter. But overall, like I think we would like to, in a year, at the end of 2023, what kind of change will we see? So inclusive, and this is where we can put in language about like, who do we want to include in this work? So bringing traditionally marginalized people into the processes, the activities, the decision-making, the policy-making in a way that shares power. And then equitable, right? We want to do stuff, and this is like, already the work we're doing is working towards this of like seeking to address systemic injustice, inequity, or oppression. But there are ways that we can build that into our goals. So I think Jamie gave the example last time, right? So like a SMART goal would be, okay, what you're going to do, you're going to build a volunteer team. So the measurable part is like how many, right? You're going to have 100 people and you're going to do this by May. So that's time bound. But there's no like equity involved in that. So to make it equitable, you would say, add this piece of like in this group of 100 people that we're going to recruit to do this thing by May, at least X number of those people are going to be, so for this example, 10 people of color will be recruited. And why are we doing it? So that they can help shape the way that we run the canvases, so that that can be built into the way that we're doing our work, so that we can have those voices as we're building it. Do folks have questions just before we get like deeper diving around what a Smarty goal is or what it might look like? And I'll say what Jamie and I put together is like not perfect. So we will probably keep coming back to this and go like, is this it? Does it fit? Is it Smarty? Okay. So now, is my screen showing a draft work plan? Okay, let me stop my share. Okay. So what Jamie and I started drafting, and again, this is just so there's like a starting place. We looked at, so Teresa, this will help you. So the goal of this group for 2023, oops, not by December 32nd. That's going to be very interesting if that happens. 2032, woo, we have lots of time. I don't know what was happening that day. Our charter is to create accessible information, outreach, and educational materials to engage hard to reach or previously unreached communities in Contra Costa. That is like what the council has decided is our goal for the equity committee. By the end of 2023, we want to have done this.
Jamie,
Yes.
can I be annoying and ask
Please,
you
100%.
to hide your ribbon
Oh, yes. Let's see.
next to your name at the very top?
Uh-huh.
That little arrow. Uh-huh.
Oh, oh, thank you. Woo,
You're
I
welcome.
didn't know that was going on.
That way
Okay.
we can see a little bit more of the planet one.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. And I'll make this bigger too. Oh, it's not letting me, but yes. One of the things Jamie and I were talking about, like to add the E part of the Smarty was like, well, what does this have to do with equity? And it was proposing maybe so that people experiencing homelessness have equitable access to housing resources. Right? If people know what's available and how to access them, if that information is shared in an equitable way, then the idea is that it will create equitable access to at least like know where to start.
I have
Yep.
I was looking at this and the entire time, so geez. We're in an equity committee.
Mhm.
This equity committee has been long time coming.
Mhm.
Like there's been a lot of conversation around equity. And when we first started, it was, equity specifically around people of color. And then it was equity around, I mean, it's still the same, not that it changes, but it's just in addition to, there's different streams of equity. And in these descriptions, is there a way to specify which equity we are talking about? Because it can go in like, is it specifically like, there's multiple forms of equity that is being developed right now.
Mhm.
So are we capturing all of that? I think that's my question.
It's such a good question. And Joe, that's one of the things that I've been grappling with too. And I started to kind of drill down a little bit, like when we get to like key target populations, or when we start to look at like, okay, so where are the gaps? Who are we missing? Who's not getting this information? Like that is, I think, where we get to start figuring out who the focus is and who, can we, yeah. Can I see
If
your
we
point,
said,
Rach?
if I would say equity on the county level, we need to go past East, we need to go to East County. Because on a county level, equity isn't getting out to East County, right? Like that's what I would think. Like, but then on a community level, then we might want to look at like, once we do get to East County, then we have to go to the community and look at what equity what that looks like. And then I think it might even go a little bit deeper than just that. Like, so I don't know. I'm
Yep.
really trying to like make sense of all of that.
Yes. Kiva, go ahead.
I think that when we address the systemic equity issue, then all of that will sort of fall into place, because the issue is not an individual, not particularly an individual community or an individual vicinity. The issue is the systemic inequity, which causes maybe that one area or these pockets of area to appear and to be prevalent. So it's addressing each individual pocket can possibly help those people in that pocket. But I believe that we need to look on a deeper level and look at the system, the entire system. And when we look at the system and we address the issue on the systemic level, and not just the mechanically systemic level, the psychological systemic level, right? And so, in other words, we know that, for instance, the Black community may be more involved, home, unhoused or not, in the faith community. So we have to address this issue systemically by addressing it possibly in the faith area, right? In the area of faith based organizations. Or so it has to, in my opinion, we have to look at it systemically, because once we address it on that, in that depth, and not on that, in that depth.
Can you just, what do you mean by systemically?
I just explained. So not just mechanically, not just doing it for this group of people or for that group of people. We have to look at the psychological system as well as the vicinity, as well as the specific communities. We have to look at the entire system of the way we look at things, the way we in Contra Costa County look at things, people, period, and how they address and they view the entire county, not just East County or West County. We have to look at what is causing, on a county level, what is causing a lot of the pockets to end up being in East County, or what is causing them. And it might be something as obvious as gentrification. Or it might, again, be something as obvious as getting into the faith-based organizations so that we can reach people on an individual level. Because we know that when we get into faith-based organizations, we're reaching people at their level.
So one thing I wanted to flag, and I think this conversation is like a perfect example of what happens for me, is like every time I try and focus sort of specifically on something related to equity, it like keeps going like big, small, big, small. It's like, for me, it feels very, very slippery to try and figure out it feels like those like squeezy dolls where you like squeeze one side and like another part bulges out, right? It's like, how do we wrap our brains around this? One of the things to our benefit is that we have already decided our lane for the next year is we're really going to focus on like information outreach and educational materials. So we have not decided to necessarily look at like upstream root causes of homelessness in this really comprehensive way. But what we can do is look at like, okay, who's not getting the information they need to connect to services and understand? We actually have some data around this, right? We've had an equity assessment that's been conducted. We have data showing like who is and who isn't coming to our front door. There are some ways in the beginning that we can, for example, identify key target populations. And we could even decide as a group, as a goal, we're going to identify, maybe we're just going to pick 2 populations that we're going to focus on. That would be measurable, right? Identify 2 key populations that we're going to focus on for this next year. We're going to really drill down and understand. First, we're going to figure out, okay, who are we missing? Maybe there's 5 groups we're missing, cut any number of ways. Okay, then we're going to figure out, we're going to focus on 2 of those. And if we just focus on those 2, what do we need to do to like solve this problem of lack of information? That's, they're not getting it, they're not understanding it, there's something happening. Just for those 2, and the work that we do over the year to do that process for maybe just 2 different groups, even 1, will be the foundation. Then we will have learned a huge amount. That can then be a foundation for then to, like, when we talk about scaling up, right? We can then take what we learned from that year and start to expand that to other groups. But I really encourage us to get as specific as possible on some level, just so that we can not get lost, because I know I get lost all the time doing this work because there's so many like important, urgent things that keep coming up. So I don't know how that resonates.
Well, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So if we were to think about targeting specific populations, which definitely is one way of funneling this effort, how would we, how would we do that, right? I mean, that's the big like elephant in the room question, because, even you and I were going back and forth on the complexity of like, do you look at how exits to housing? Do you like, what metric do you look at to define? And then how do you, choose a population or 2 populations, if it's 2 populations, based on kind of a complex set of factors? So on the one hand, I completely agree that that is a really, potentially effective way to segment the work. But then I just wonder if that kind of opens us up to a lot of complexity in identifying, even though it's clear, like when it is clear that there are populations in need that need targeted outreach and targeted assistance. But I don't know, kind of like preemptively a little bit nervous about that route. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
And Jamie,
Yeah.
do you have the document on hand, or maybe it can be found in the next few minutes, the document that you were referring to about the data that we have that
Sure.
can maybe guide us? Because
Yep.
go ahead.
What I'll say is we don't need to solve that problem right now. We don't need to pick the population right now. What we need to do today is figure out how we want to think about this all. Like, part of that, like, so my vision is sort of the first month. I mean, the first quarter is planning, the second quarter. And so that's where we're like figuring out, what do we need to know to move forward? So what are the ways that we're going to get more information so that we can like identify whether it's a population, or what are the pieces that need to be improved, or what are the new channels that we need to create? Quarter 2 is sort of like drafting that. Okay, so now we have an idea of like who we're looking at. So let's start tinkering with what exists or start creating something new. Quarter 3 is maybe when we start testing that stuff, right? And this is again where there's like lots of opportunities for people with lived experience. You're our target population. How does this resonate with you? How would you change this? Is this working? Is this information getting to you through this channel? And then by quarter 4, that's where we're like, okay, we think we have something kind of final. Let's roll it out and also figure out a way to like build in some feedback loops so that we can continue to get information about whether or not that's working, what we're trying, whether or not that's working. Does that make sense? And that doesn't have to be how we do it, but that's kind of how I've been thinking about this, like this year of like how we think about the work. What we're actually going to do is like, that's where we get into the activities. Joe, how is that landing?
Um, I didn't realize I was still on unmute. That's great, because if I knew that, I would have just kept talking. I was trying to get back to Zoom to unmute, but I'm already unmuted. So Jamie just dropped in the chat, some of the couple of things in the chat. And I mean, I guess everything you said resonates, but I still think that there's something that's not settling. I don't know. We'll just keep talking and see what happens.
I let me see. Am I?
You're unmuted. You're good, Kiva. Go ahead.
Um, I see the equity piece of diversity, equity, and inclusion as something that is so intricate and because equity could mean anything in any specific type of situation, right? You get a family together and a whole family together, and you have equity issues in that single family, right? You may have equity issues in that single family. You get 3 friends together and you may have an equity issue in that group of 3 friends. So equity is it can be very, very intricate, very specific. So I think that as long as we understand that, as long as we understand that there's always going to be some type of equity issue, as long as we have to make sure that we stay on track for specifically what our equity issue is, what we've defined our DEI issue is, so that we don't go down rabbit holes.
Mhm. So I see a few folks have joined that are new. So I'll recap a little bit what I've been hearing going on. And the goal of our meeting today is to really just get some first reactions to a draft work plan for our 2023 work in the Equity Committee, based off of the prioritized goal that we put in front of the council last meeting before, where we're trying to, as a committee, create accessible information outreach and educational materials to engage hard to reach or previously underserved communities. And the goal today, again, is to really get that reaction to what this starter dough is of a work plan. We know it's hard to look at a blank page and all of a sudden co-draft and co-wordsmith in a group like this. So we wanted to give people things to react to. It's by no means perfect. We shouldn't be striving for perfection. This work is not going to happen if we're looking for the perfect solution to everything. And to really see it as a dynamic, living, breathing document, because we're going to revisit this throughout the year. We're not going to let it go die in a drawer. That's my pet peeve about work plans. And so hopefully we can keep improving upon what's laid out, and we can keep refining where we're seeing those gaps happening, and keep making sure that we are keeping ourselves accountable. So to that end, has everybody seen kind of this format, this template that we've been working on?
Can I want to, if we can go back to the main purpose. Yeah, that right there. So earlier when I was mentioning the multiple levels of, somebody mentioned a babushka, right? Like we're always talking about multiple levels of the equitable. Well, so the sentence in here, and I'm reading it and I keep reading it over and over and over. It's that last part, so that people experiencing homelessness have equitable access to housing resources. How the outcome. Okay, so where I am getting fumbled, and this is where language matters, this experiencing homelessness have ? Equitable access. What kind of equitable access are we trying to provide? Is it systematic equitability? Is it personal equitability? Is it Kiva mentioned the psychological part of it. Like, is there a way that we can even specify it more to say that we're doing systemic equitable access? Like, what kind of equitable access are we talking about?
Sure, I think that is a great addition to talk about at a system level. People are having that equitable access to resources and housing outcomes, because that's really one of the roles of the council, is to look at our service community as a system. So I think that that's a good addition.
How does this work? Housing resources and like to the housing resources provided by the homeless system of care? Like where does the systems piece fit in?
Well, and I think that's, well, the only reason I said systematic or systemic was because of the type of equity that we're trying to get access. What type of equity is it? Because we have so many different layers of equity, what is it?
And I think that's part of why Jamie and I tried to focus just for what we drafted was like, okay, as you said, there's like a million ways that we could think about equity. What's our end goal? We want people to have access to housing resources and get housed at equitable rates, right? Like ultimately that's our goal.
And what is equitable rates? What does equitable rates mean?
We're talking racial equity.
Well,
right?
we're talking many things. So this is, again, where basically you can't predict how whether or not somebody's gonna get housed based on their race, their disability status, their education, their sexual identity, right? If something's inequitable, if the system's inequitable, then you could probably predict that like somebody is or isn't gonna get housing. But if we do this, it should basically be, so for example, we have African Americans are 4 times overrepresented coming in our front door. If they're 4 times overrepresented in our system, then they should be 4 times, you know what I mean? Like that should, if there's not a gap, then people in that group should be getting housed proportionate to their number of people in the group, in the population. Like it shouldn't be different. I'm having a hard time articulating it, but does that make sense? I don't know that makes sense. Go ahead, Rachel. I'm having a rough brain day.
Join the club. I have a question about it's a question about a different part of this goal. So if people want to stay on this one, then I can kind of come back to what I wanted to say. Do you want to stay on the systemic equitable access piece, and then mine's about the hard to reach language.
And one thing I'll say is what's been approved by the Council on Homelessness. This is sort of our official charter for the year.
Okay.
So we may or may not want to really like tinker with this right now.
Okay.
And Jamie, I don't know if you have thoughts about that, but like, just to be clear, this is what the Council on Homelessness approved. We consider like we could tinker with it to make it more clear. I just don't know what that process looks like.
I get, just to clarify why I was focusing on that, and I totally understand if it's too complicated to even, but the hard to reach piece, it kind of felt a little bit like the onus was being placed on the populations rather than the county and the system of care taking ownership for it. And maybe it's just like a slight nuance, and maybe it's not read that way by other people.
Underserved.
Yes, exactly. That was what I was going to suggest. Because you're talking about equitable access, you're not, right? It's like, I just don't like that agency there. So that's what I wanted to flag.
Yeah. I think that's why we made the or statement of previously unreached, because that puts it back on us of, nope, we didn't reach out. That's why.
Yep. No, I get that. I don't know. That was just what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
I agree with that sentiment. What makes people hard to reach? I don't, you can't say people are hard to reach. I mean, right? So it isn't a matter of, and that's one of the reasons why I was saying the psychological aspect of the system, because because you are able to reach one community one way does not mean that that's the only way to reach every community. So just because just because we reach this one community that way, we're going to say the other community is hard to reach. That's not equitable. Nor is it inclusive, actually. So because you can't use nobody, we're not all the same, and we don't all think the same, we don't all interact the same, we don't all have the same culture. So I just because I am in East County doesn't mean I should be hard to reach.
So one question I have, I want to be mindful of what the big goal, which is we're trying to, by the end of December, right? So by the time we have at the end of our next meeting, which is like December 13th or something, we want to have a work plan so that come January, we're like, hey, this is what we're doing. New committee members, you want to get on board? This is our goal. This is what we're going to do by the end of Q1. This is what our plan is. This is what you want to have achieved, blah, blah, blah. We could spend a lot of time on this, and it might be important of like tinkering with the sort of overall goal. But I also want to make really sure that we have enough time to start thinking about, we sort of generally are understanding, we want to make sure that people who don't have information or aren't connected to services or don't know about what's available or don't want what's available and are not engaging with services for whatever reasons, that we understand who those folks are, what some of the barriers are, and come up with some ideas about how to do things differently. Like at 30,000 feet, that to me is what the charter is of this group. Is that also your understanding? Let's see other things in the chat.
So I think what we could do to keep it moving forward is, we heard the feedback around kind of the language changes wanted. And so when we bring back the next draft next month, we can play around with language and and see if it resonates. And in the meantime, y'all are welcome to share your ideas with us, and email them, drop them in the chat, send carrier pigeon, however best works, so that we can make sure we're not creating this in a vacuum.
How do folks feel about moving towards creating goals for each quarter? I can't see. Hold on.
Thumbs up are happening.
Okay, good. I'm like, I can't see. I'm just like trying to fly plane here. Okay. So again, this is like stuff that Jamie Schechter and I just like ripped out of our head and threw onto paper. So this is really up for discussion. But like by the end of Q1, so assuming the end goal is that we have some new stuff and channels at the end of the year where we're getting information out to people that need it, backing all the way up. The first step seems like we kind of need to know what we already have, who the different populations are, and like what channels are, who's sort of, we were talking about this behind the scenes sort of as like amplifiers and channels, like who are the people in our community that are signal boosting the information we put out? Could be librarians, could be folks that work in EHSD, could be folks working outreach, could be like a certain group of people with lived experience, could be churches. Like we want to figure out, kind of doing a like sort of talking about this like landscape analysis, right? What kind of stuff do we already have out there, right? We have like a flyer, we have blah, blah, blah. So looking at all that stuff, figuring out what's there, who are we connecting with, who are we not connecting with, and who are currently our sort of amplifiers, right? Who are our boosters and who's not, that we think might need to be. What do folks think about that as a possible goal for Q1? So this is the time bound part, right? By the end of March, we would have done what? And then the activities is sort of like, what more specifically, like, well, what would we need to do and be able to do that? And this is part of that equity piece, right? Making sure that who are we including in this process? That's sort of the process piece, right? Who are we including? We want to be explicit. Are we recruiting new people? Yep, Rachel, go ahead.
So I love the idea of identifying amplifiers and getting clear on that. The other thing I was going to say too, and of course my brain is almost always on libraries, but like even drilling down to what types of materials and messaging each amplifier is providing to the community. So in terms of libraries, like, what is out there? Is it like a big poster when folks come in? Is it, like I've been to libraries where there's a community resource board, like prominently displayed with all sorts of things, shower locations, food, food banks, just really critical resources, and it's pretty prominently displayed. So just, I guess, like getting to that level of really identifying and then using people with lived expertise to say, to help us understand what's missing, what's working at these different, stations, for example, the libraries. Like, what would you like to see there that, you think would reach people and help people? That's it.
I happen to know that there are a lot of organizations, not particularly churches, but just individual organizations and programs that pop up here. Well, I'm gonna go serve, I'm gonna go give socks to the homeless, or I'm going to go give food to the homeless. So how are we I'm envisioning that this part of the goal would be to connect to those individual agencies at a lower, when I say lower level, what I mean is, and I might be saying it's opposite, it should be higher level maybe. But how are we reaching out to those individual people and individual programs and organizations that pop up here and there who are actually serving this population? And do we know these organizations like mobility labs? Do we know these organizations? Are we reaching out to them and giving them support and giving them the information to give to their clients?
Yeah, then when we talk about it, sometimes we talk about them as homeless service provider adjacent, where they're not necessarily providing housing or case management to get you housing, but they're working with the same people we're working with. And so really trying to see who those people are, where our gaps are. When we're talking about like the reviewing a partner provider map, like listing out who are the partners that we're working with and where are we having gaps. We know East County has gaps because they're just they're lesser served than the rest of the community. So how do we work then to boost up that partner provider map and include those adjacent folks?
Exactly. The food bank has distribution centers all around the county, 7 days a week. And I don't see any issue with providing us with a printed piece of paper to hand out to the people who are actually getting the meals or the food as well. We're not overlapping services, but we are just giving information.
Yeah. Thank you, but we can do that today. We can send you that flyer.
I listening to this conversation, I'm drawn to my Sunday mornings. I haven't been there in a long time, but when I was living in my car there, I still go there often, but not as often as I used to. But every Sunday morning, he was called the oatmeal guy. He would come with a big, huge pot of oatmeal every Sunday morning. We would do mass. He's a pastor, also a car mechanic. So I feel like as everybody's talking about this and as we're looking at this goal, in my network, in everybody who's even on this committee right now, we all have a network that we can reach out to and get a list of who's doing that service. Like, I feel like we need to do that work because what I know isn't the same thing as what somebody else knows. And we all need to go out there and get that list and get that content.
Absolutely.
So we can connect them to where we are now. And so I'm wondering, like, like, I'm really stuck on this review current outreach efforts. I feel like that is where my peer support, kind of connecting with the people that are currently living in the crisis of homelessness, that's where I'm like, those focus groups, I feel like should be Sunday morning with the oatmeal guy. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm not too sure how that goes to do that. Like, I don't know. I don't know,
We'll get to
but
that.
I feel like something like that needs to,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Joe, that's exactly right. That falls right under this. Like what we would do is we're saying we're going to develop a list. So to me, oatmeal guy is an amplifier, right?
Yes.
So we developed this list and we're like, hey, Joe, who do you know? Kiva, who do you know? Rachel, who do you know? Let's pull in some more people. Who do you know? Who are the people that like Jamie and I might not know about? That's the list. So what we would put on here is we're going to develop a list. So in Q1, we're going to have a meeting where we all get together and we create a document and we develop that list. And then, okay, so we have this list, but then like, what do we do with that list? So this is where we figure out, you know, do we have a survey we do with them? Do we have a focus group with them? Do we do interviews with them? What do we want to know from them? And part of what we want to know is like, you know, who are you connecting with? Who are the folks, you know, what are the things that you're hearing on the ground? What are the tools that you would find useful? What are the barriers that you're seeing, and how could we provide information or education to help close some of those gaps for people? That's, to me, like, that's the next piece, is like we develop this list and then we do something with that list of people to get more information to help inform phase 2, which is like, then we start actually drafting and building whatever those tools are that they say we need. So Rachel, you said like, maybe we need posters. Great. So we draft a poster. Third quarter, we're like, hey, everybody, here's our draft poster. And they're like, that sucks. We go, okay, fine. We'll go back to the drawing board, but hopefully they won't say that sucks, because we've gotten the right people in the ring to help develop it based on all this input we're getting.
And Meredith, I see your hand up. Sorry, didn't want to.
Yeah.
No worries. This makes a lot of sense to me, like just getting stock of what's out there before in order to figure out where the gaps are. I'm also wondering if there's a way to measure which methods are most effective. And maybe that doesn't exist, but so what if there's a poster at the library if no one's seeing it? And I don't know how to, you know, we're already trying to do a lot, but that is on my mind.
Yeah, that is something that I'll note here too, is we want to make sure we're being realistic, right? And I hate to sound like the Debbie Downer, but that's part of our thought process with kind of having the Q1 be the planning and review of the landscape analysis, having Q2 be drafting, having Q3 be our testing, and then having Q4 be our finalizing and reflecting, you know, building in the places for the evaluation of how well we're doing and making sure we're recruiting in. Because the thing that I want to avoid is, with any of our committees, is having a work plan where we look back at the quarter and because we set so ambitious a goals, we're like, oh, we didn't do anything. It just turns out that this is work that takes a lot of thoughtfulness and a lot of time. And so I don't want us to feel like we're not doing the work if we haven't, you know, done everything in Q1, if that makes sense. But I also hear the urgency, and that's rightfully so.
So to that end, Jamie, one of the things I'm thinking is like, you know, so maybe we come up, we don't know how many amplifiers we're going to get, but then we say, okay, we're going to set a goal, like we're going to talk to, so maybe we have a goal, you know, a list of like 50 different people. Can we really get, maybe we can, but we should set a goal for ourselves of like, okay, so how many of those people do we feel like we want to talk to that will give us at least enough information so we can start? Because the other
Or how
thing
many of them even want to talk to us?
Totally.
You know, like,
Yes.
I mean,
so we set a goal of 7, we have to reach out to 20 to get those 7. Great. But we've said as a group, we would feel comfortable if we get input from at least number. That gives us enough so that we can move forward. Because you could get stuck and be like, well, we really haven't heard from enough people. And then we never, ever get to the next phase because we let perfection be the enemy of the good, which I've suffered. So you know, so I'm just making this up. It doesn't have to be 7. But do you see how we're kind of like trying to get it more specific without boxing us in? But like, as Jamie said, so at the end of Q1, we go back to the council and they're like, what did you do? Well, we set a goal to talk to at least 7 amplifiers. We got to 5. We felt like that was good enough. And now we're moving on to phase 2. Rachel, go ahead.
So I wonder whether it makes sense to think about it, like cover the gamut of amplifiers in terms of systems, the different systems and departments within the county. So for example, like if we think about the criminal legal system or child welfare system, or there's public libraries and there's school districts, like, would it be important to be inclusive and comprehensive in that way too, rather than just like a number? Because it might be that, right, that like then we reach the number, but it's all within a specific sector and it all is kind of interacting with a specific population where I think we, you know, ideally would want is like a wider net so that we are right, like reaching the underserved from a lot of different angles. And we can use that to our advantage if we think about amplifiers. Like I'm thinking the word categorically is coming to my head. It's not like the most appropriate word, but like you, I'm a little bit brain dead. But yeah, so I was just thinking about that and kind of either adjacent to quantity or instead of quantity or something like that.
One of the things I was going to show that might help us kind of figure out the sectors, and this is not perfect, but we've done some of this thinking to develop our partner system map. So sorry, don't look for a minute. It's going to make your brain hurt. Okay. So what we have, like this may be one way that we look at sectors. Like we want to talk to, you know, somebody from affordable housing, healthcare, education, workforce, public benefits, basic needs, veterans, criminal justice, victim services, in addition to like the inside. I don't know. That's just like one way we could look at that.
And something that I think it was Rachel that was just speaking, but there was something that got me too. Like Contra Costa County is so huge, and we're I don't know, what is there, 5 districts, right? But then even if we look at the mapping of those districts, like and our mapping actually just got changed recently too. But I'm thinking, if we're looking for a number, if we're looking for like, should we say at least 2 from each district? I mean, like, we're gonna want to not just part of the county, but the whole county, not just East County, even though East County needs a lot of help. You know, like we need a representation from every nook and cranny of the county. So do we do that with the lines of our interior city lines or district lines or county lines? I don't know. But I'm thinking that we have to like really, we need to make sure that we hit the entire county, and the county is huge.
And what I would say to that too is we got to be real careful about confusing equality with equity, right? Because I think that we could get a kind of a sample from each district and do that. And it could be really challenging to suss out someone from Orinda or, you know, Lafayette or something when we know that there are a lot of needs in other places. So I think this could be something that we really dig into of like, what's the right mix? And what's the right mix for right now, right? What doesn't mean we're never doing something like this ever again. It just means for Q1, what do we want to look at?
Right. And if that's, I mean, we need to go to East County. We need to go all the way to Discovery Bay. Like that's where most of everything that we do needs to go out that way.
That's
Well,
definitely one of the important places. Yep.
I was gonna say, we should already know the high incident areas that are in the county, right? We know that, we have that information. So when we are looking for that representation and those people with lived experience, we have the information to help us reach out to those specific demographic areas, the localities, communities. So having this, I mean, it's important to have this conversation, but we already know that we already know where we need to go. So in order to be equitable, we have to go where the people are that we serve.
And so you can see what I added. One of the things that we could do is like, as you know, maybe we set a goal to recruit 3 new people to get involved in this work. And maybe we prioritize, like, we definitely want somebody from Far East County because we know we're really lacking connections out there. Like there's different ways that we can make sure that we're getting coverage from like the sectors and the geography. And you know, one of the things that we find out too is like the barriers to people in Disco Bay are maybe really different from the barriers for people in North Richmond.
Right.
So, and we won't know that unless we're talking to people in both those areas. And so maybe that, you know, part of what happens is like we figure out like, okay, in this area, we need this kind of messaging or this kind of whatever. This goes back to the like figuring out who's our focus when we talk about underserved or previously unreached. Yeah. Okay, so we're like halfway through a meeting, just flagging, which is fine. We also have December. We have time in December. Also, we don't have to finish this whole thing today. Let me see if there's stuff in the chat. Yep, we've got
You're on mute.
Jamie. I know, I was just laughing. It was like Jamie Shepherd says 5 districts covering a county the size of Rhode Island.
just about.
That's my favorite fact about Contra Costa.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, pretty close to the size of Rhode Island.
That's great.
Okay, so for Q1, we have this goal. How do we feel about this goal? By the end of Q1, we will have assessed what materials there are, where the information gap are, figure out who are the key target populations, and identify sort of where the information channels and amplifiers are.
And are we going to ask outside members outside of this committee to seek that information?
I think this group will say, here's the information we want, and you guys can figure out how you want to divide up going out and getting it.
All
Like,
right.
it's
Yeah.
not going to be just us providing this information. Maybe you're all having conversations with, you know, maybe that's part of what you decide to do for yourselves. Is like, we all give ourselves homework. You got to go talk to one person. I mean, there's, I forget what they're called. It's like, you know, this is what you do in community organizing. Like, you go have an interview with somebody and you're like, okay, who are the leaders in the community? And then they give you some names and you go talk to them and they're like, who are the leaders in the community? And eventually you come up with the same names, right? We might end up doing some of that.
Well, and then, okay, so then can we entertain this discussion really quick for the idea? So with this, I'm Sunday, providing that the weather is good, I'll go down to that church where I was just talking about oatmeal and fried chicken. And like, how do I pitch this to him? Like, I have talked to this community many times around, you know, nobody knows that I'm sitting on the, well, not nobody, but not everybody knows that I'm on the council and doing this work, but the people who are in leadership know, but not the people who I share breakfast with every morning. So how do I bring, like, will we have that discussion on how we bring this, or are we just doing it on our own, just like I have been doing it? Or will you, like, not you personally, but like, is there a process that we might share?
Yeah,
I
so
don't know.
what I hear you asking is, like, how do we let people know about this work we're doing so that they get involved?
Right, how do I
Yep.
approach it? Like, do I approach it as somebody who's representing the county? Do I, you know, can I sit there with my professional hat and represent the county while doing this? Or do I still have to, I don't know. And what support do I get in that? Like, if I have to, I know prints are available if I'm, you know, handing paper out, whatever, but.
Yeah. I mean, I think we'll get there. I don't think we're there yet because I think we haven't quite figured out what we're, I think what you can do now, and I think what everybody can do now is say like, hey, I mean, so right now we're in this process of building a work plan. If people care about that and they want to join this next meeting in December, great. But once we have the work plan, you know, you'll actually have some talking points. Like, okay, this is the stuff we're working on in the next 3 months. Like, are you
Right,
someone I
that's
can
what I
come
was
back
looking
and
for.
talk
Okay,
to?
great. Yeah. Yeah.
And then
yep.
when you come back and talk to them, this group will have figured out like what's the interview guide or what are the questions that we're going to be asking people. You'll have this group will create those tools.
Yeah, that's
Does
what I
that
was.
answer that question?
Yep, that's it. Yep.
Probably a red herring.
Mhm.
Sorry, off
Mhm.
the top of my head. Contra Costa County can afford a little bit of money to put some homeless information on a billboard.
Facts.
Billboards, people look at billboards, you know, as someone was saying, we need to look at what are the best ways to reach people, and what we understand is that people learn in different ways. There's some kinesthetic learners that have to do things in order to get it. There's some auditory learners that have to hear it. There's some visual learners that have to see it. Most of us are coordinated learners, which means if we get it, if we see it, hear it, and do it, we get it, right? And so it is really wise to present every single area, every single venue to reach these people, and to reach these people, which means everything. You give them a sheet of paper and say it, and have them look at a website. I mean, so that it sinks in, because not everybody's going to get the one. Some people cannot read, right? And so when I was a social worker, I handed them forms and I had them sign, but I read the forms to them or quoted them to them as well, because they needed to hear it as well as see it. Some people couldn't read, or some people may have gotten overwhelmed with all the words on the paper, the way I do. So I think that it's important that we remember that as long as we're being presenting this information in a coordinated way, and I was just thinking that billboards are a great way to get people's attention, and to give them information at the same time.
So Kiva, that was great, because what that helped me think of was like, these are some of the questions we're going to ask the amplifiers, and then maybe also people with lived experience. What are the ways you want to get the information? It may be really different for those two different populations. So we can include all those as possibilities. And then based on that information, prioritize resources. Yeah. Are folks still wanting to hang out on Q1? Or are you ready to start talking about Q2? Sorry, my kid's coming in.
I'm ready to go to Q2.
So Q2 is where we start talking about like draft.
So our goal with, I'll hop in. Our goal with kind of the quarters is to sequence and build on things. We didn't want to introduce 10 new activities in each quarter, because we know that's just not realistic in the way that we do work, right? So we wanted to set Q1 up to be really that planning and identifying and learning and researching sort of quarter. And then Q2 is using what we planned and learned and researched to develop plans and to develop new materials and identify new things and do all that stuff that builds on top of what we've learned.
Jamie, do you mind doing a little talking? I have a visitor.
Yes. Okay. So this is what we were looking at. And again, this was just our starter dough. Feel free to pick apart what feels right to pick apart. But by the end of Q2, we want to draft information tools and identify those amplifiers to develop new channels and to share information on homeless services. So really taking the time to create and refine and build new things, and then identify those folks who will help us spread that message further. And some of those activities also include, developing an evaluation plan for people with lived experience to provide input on those materials. So we want folks in the room all the time, and we also know that that's not a commitment that everybody can make. So we want to make sure that we are providing a kind of a menu of opportunities for people to plug in, and that could be hey, let me just review a flyer and give you my quick opinion, or it could be I'm coming to every single meeting and I'm gonna have my say, which is great. All those are great. We thought about developing, X or Y number of new materials, a new flyer, a new video, a billboard, whatever, with a focus on, the coordinated entry system process and access point information, how to get people into that front door. And then trying to set a number. Can you scroll down, Jamie? Here I set a number of new partnerships to cultivate with a focus maybe on East County or with TAY, or again, those groups that we know have been underserved or historically marginalized or what have you. So this is where in the template, this is highlighted red. We wanted to get your all's input on like what feels reasonable, ambitious, and achievable in terms of how many numbers or how many materials are we going to look to draft. And how do we build on this?
Yeah, go ahead, Leslie.
Hi, thanks everybody. Thank you, Jamie, for explaining that a little bit more, because I wasn't sure about the third bullet, what we meant. Identify new partnerships to cultivate with a focus on, for what purpose though? Really, that was my question. Who are the places or the people, but with what purpose? To become better channels of information, to help give us feedback, to help us advocate, to get so for what purpose those partnerships? That was one of my questions. And then also on the first bullet, I'm assuming we mean persons with lived experience of homelessness, but could we also mean persons with lived experience of low vision, low hearing, monolingual households? Like, there's that aspect of it too. Maybe we should be a little thoughtful about.
Yep.
I'm just thinking about the fact, I'm possibly another red herring. I'm a little slow, y'all, so sometimes, but I'm just thinking about the fact that sometimes our homeless populations, our unhoused populations, mobilize. In other words, they move from place to place, right? And there are reasons for that. There may be legal reasons. There may be reasons, policing issues. There may be issues of accessibility. There may be issues of violence or against them, or the community mobilizing against them and not wanting them there, so they move somewhere else, right? So I'm just really cognizant of the fact that we don't want to put a label on East County. I mean, at any point, East County could be not the epicenter of homelessness at some point, right? So I just I know that we're here, we're in that place right now. I just want to put a little note on that.
And I think actually, Kiva, what that makes me think of is like, with all of this, we want this to be data informed, right? We don't just want to get together as a group of 7 people and be like, well, this is what we think should happen because we work in this field or we have this lived experience. That's why we're using this, qualitative data that we have in these conversations, but we also have quantitative data that will tell us who is living where. And it's not perfect, but we do have the data to show us where the gaps are. That's exactly what has brought us here to this point. So, point well taken. Anything else specific people want to add for this kind of quarter 2, which to me is like where you start making the things that we've learned that we need, or started to really strengthen those partnerships that we've identified in that first quarter? We can come back to this too if we want to move to quarter 3 and get a feel for that, and then come back to quarter 2. Yeah, Leslie, go ahead.
Just a question, because my thinking behind this was, well, who's going to do the drafting, right? This committee, H3 staff, any or all of us. But then I got to thinking, well, do we have money that we could actually hire people who do this professionally to draft high quality materials? Just putting it out there.
So it's a really good question. So one of the things I can tell you is that we have, as part of our fact finding, once we get kind of into Q1, I can check in with our communications team for health services. That is basically what I can tell you, like, is as a county department, they are going to not look kindly on us contracting with outside graphic designers when we have our own entire communications team for health services. So we can, part of what might happen is we decide, here are some things we can do in-house and here are some things that we need some professional support with. But I will have an early conversation with that communications team and say, like, hey guys, this is coming down the pike. I want this to be on your radar, and then we can pull them in at a certain point and they can tell us what they can and can't support with. And then we can kind of go from there. Yeah, Joe.
That sounds great, because we want high quality stuff, just like, you know.
You do not want me making flyers.
Well, I mean, you know, yes, it has its place for sure, but if we want to be impactful, let's bring the professionals in. So,
Joe, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, and this in-house kind of like graphic, I feel like this material that's being created is something like, okay, sure, it may change a little bit here and there, but this is pretty much that template, that foundation that's going to infiltrate our entire system of care. I mean, I see this stuff hitting CCTV. I see it being, you know, distributed in newsletters throughout different departments, not just those who are battling homelessness. So I think that really keeping focus on the consistency of the graphics and the way that they look, and then that, you know, maybe different colors here and there, but it should really be a specific design that hits the entire county, like a wave of, you know, graphic awesomeness.
Yeah, what I hear you saying, Joe, is branding, right? So, and this
That's
is something
exactly
we've
it.
kind of struggled with, is like some of our stuff looks different from each other. And this is, yes, so there's like branding for sort of our COC, which we kind of have, but there may be some ways that we tighten that up or sharpen it or make it even
And it would
more
be
clear.
specifically an equity brand. It's an equity brand. So it's, you know, so specifically around equity.
Great. So let's move to Q3 just to take a look. And again, we come back. So Q3, I sort of think of this as like the testing, right? And so I don't know if any of you are familiar with like this improvement science around like plan, do, study, act. To me, this is kind of the study, right? We've done a bunch of planning and then we're doing, right? We're testing, we've created this stuff, and testing is where we're going to like throw stuff at the wall and see what happens. And so this is where we're going to be doing a lot of like getting feedback, like, okay, so we took your input. This is what we came up with. What do you think? And this is where I think there's like lots of opportunities for people with lived experience to review stuff, provide feedback. We want to be able to like test, not just, do you like the way this looks, but like, is the message being received? Do you understand how to access services? Do you understand what to expect after you call 211 or whatever the thing is that we decided we want people to understand? And also we will probably want to like check in with the, you know, our old guard of folks that are used to all this stuff, and then check in on some new people. Maybe we haven't gotten these messages to before. If they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about, and we thought we were crystal clear because it's the language we speak every day, that's really good information to have. So this is kind of what we were thinking about just around Q3. Thoughts, questions?
And to put it in the context of calendars, Q3 is that July, August, September timeframe where a lot of folks who are providers and a lot of H3, we have a lot of our time monopolized by the COC NOFO process.
That is a very good point. So this might look different, you know, all of this is like sort of our intentions around what we want to have happen when, but it just gives us like a starting place. So yes, this might get thrown wildly off schedule depending on what happens with NOFO. The good news is I'm not usually involved with NOFO, so I can keep the engine moving. But our providers might not be able to respond to things and
really just to like, again, continue with the thread of we want to make things achievable. And if so many of us in the room are, you know, juggling so many different competing priorities, there's only so much we should be packing into a quarter to be realistic about things.
And I wonder too, because you said earlier, like, we're really trying to reach like the maybe the people who aren't necessarily applying for NOFO funds
Yep.
anyways.
Mhm.
Yep. So then I'll just show you quarter four so you can kind of see. So quarter four is where we're like, okay, we feel pretty good. We have, this is like, we could send this out into the world as like our best final draft for now. And then at the end of that quarter, also start figuring out like, okay, so we are this equity goal. Our entire world is not going to be communication. So then that fourth corner also start thinking about what are we going to work on for 2024, which I can't believe I'm even saying that, but so PDSA is that like plan, do, study, act cycles, but it's basically like we got to figure out how we're going to know if any of this is doing any good. So, and that's kind of some of the measurable things we might set up in the beginning. Are we looking at like how many more people are calling 211? How many more people? I don't know. We can figure out what that looks like. And Jamie, I know this is kind of one of your wheelhouses. So we could figure out what do we want to be tracking? And so we can report back to the council like, yeah, guys, we spent a whole year working on this. What's come of it? Are we increasing, you know, to go back to our goal is like, we want to make sure people that are previously unreached are that we're engaging them, this goes back to the like setting measurable goals. How will we know that we've done what we wanted to do?
We may not know. So there are some indicators that we may not have for some time. Once we do these things, then we still may need a little bit more time to get the numbers to see how effective all these things, exactly how effective all these things are. What I'm thinking is, for example, one of the processes of changing something is to make the new product more accessible, and then you have to build trust. So I'm advocating for people to eat healthier, right? But the first thing I have to do is make healthier foods accessible, and then I have to build trust and build the understanding that you need to actually use what's accessible to you, right? And so what we're doing here, I see, is that we're making the information accessible. And now after we make the information accessible, the next step is to build trust and confidence in the community to utilize the information. Because I think that part of the issue of what we're having now is not just that our information isn't out there, but there are pockets of people in certain demographics that don't trust in the system. Therefore, they don't use the system. So first we have to make the information accessible to them. Then we have to develop a plan to get that trust, to accrue that trust and that well, the trust to actually use the system. And that's going to take some time. And that's why I say that, yes, we'll be able to measure what we've done, but we won't may not be able to measure the impact of what we've done for some time.
And Rachel, I see your hand, but just to respond to that, I think Kiva, you hit exactly on kind of the way that the reason behind why we were thinking about amplifiers and partners so much, because you're totally right. People, you know, if I come up to someone wearing my Contra Costa Health Services badge, they're not necessarily going to be like, oh, here's a person I can trust right off the bat. And so like really trying to identify those folks we haven't partnered with as strongly or might not be as connected to us, but people trust them. They're trusted in the community. Those can be ins to the quote unquote hard to reach. That might be hard for us to reach, but they're reaching out. We're social creatures. We have networks. So yeah, I appreciate you flagging that. And Rachel, go for it.
Yeah, so, and I definitely agree with what Kiva was saying as well. And I think beyond identifying new amplifiers, I would say maybe even the goal should be deepening relationships with existing amplifiers too, which I think also builds, is part of that trust piece as well. So I just wanted to, that was the only thing I wanted to add.
And there's this, I'm at the table, I'm part of the system, and I still don't trust the system. Sure, you know, like I could get a little close and, you know, I can do some work, but I don't trust it. I don't trust some of the people that I even work with, you know what I mean? So it's, people don't trust the system, point blank, period. And the people that we are trying to reach in an equitable way, it's going to be really hard if you don't have people in the community that are talking to them. So, and that's what I've always kind of, and this is gonna, this work, I think that outreach work that we're talking about is really gonna shine light on this factor that I've been saying for a long time now. There's an entire stream of, I don't know, outreach that is missing. The connection between the community and the system, there's something there that it's there, but we're not attached to it. It's that large gap. So as we're the system reaching out to those amplifiers, it's those amplifiers that we're gonna have to train or guide in a way, because they are the ones that are talking to the community members, right? Like, so I don't know, just kind of that dynamic there.
Yep. Our role is partially to make sure we've got real clear, consistent information, because you're right, we're not necessarily going to be the ones sharing it with people who need it. So if an amplifier is trying to figure out which version of this flyer is the most recent one, and they're sharing one from 2016, we're not doing the things that we can do as well as we should be.
And people don't sell well that thing that they don't trust. So very important that we do build trusting relationships with the amplifiers, because when they trust us, then they'll sell us with that trust, and that trust can move down down the line to the actual consumer.
Yeah,
we're not consumers anymore.
Unhoused person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I feel like we're in a good spot for Jamie and I to take this back, clean it up some more, and bring it back to you guys in December for like a finishing touches. And then this will kind of be a public, you know, there's going to be probably, I'm guessing maybe kind of two versions, one where we have like all the nitty gritty for us internally to keep track of everything, but then one that we would present to the council that's like pretty high level. This is what we're trying to try and accomplish quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4, and overall by the end of the year. And I was going to pull up, so this is in this format that Jamie has, there's like, you know, the end of every quarter too, we would come back in our, you know, third quarter meeting and go like, okay, well, what did we actually accomplish? And did we figure out we needed something really new? So we'll build that into like the meeting agendas for those quarters. we do have a little bit of time, and I think on the one hand, I just want to leave this alone, but on the other hand, I think where I'm getting a little stuck is like, are we super clear about the population that we want to focus on? And how
glad
will
you
we
brought this
know
up.
we have reached them?
So, okay, so we were talking about the data, right? We're doing this with the data that we already have. So shouldn't we say that we are making that choice based off the data? Like, why are we trying to come up with a way to describe what we already have? We are literally going off of the data. So why not just say, we're going to do what the data has shown?
Yes,
And this
and
is what the data has shown. So we're going to go to these pockets based off of that data.
And I think where, and again, just like hear me out, and maybe this makes no sense, and you guys may have already thought of this before. Where I'm trying to figure out is like, there's a bunch of different places where we could say, is our focus on people who have never engaged with services at all, period. CORE hasn't contacted them. They're not in HMIS at all. Are we trying to focus on who is coming to our front door, but still is like kind of stuck and doesn't know what the next step is? Like and Jamie, I don't know if you have thoughts about this. Like, what's the problem we're trying to solve? What's the problem we're trying to solve? We think people don't have information, and what is that resulting in? Is it that they're not accessing services? Is that they're not trusting the system because they don't know what comes next?
I think it's I think from what I've heard over the meetings that we've had together, and what I'm hearing in other committee meetings, and as I'm observing the fire hose of resources trying to be turned on and turned off at various points, what I think makes sense is to focus on that access piece, because so many times we hear, oh, I didn't know I could get help with X, Y, or Z issue, or I didn't know that this existed in my city, or all of that. And that if people know how to access resources, and that those access points are doing the work that we know what they're doing at a high level and consistently and all that jazz, that will have the impact of building trust, hopefully. But we can't build trust in a system that people don't know anything about.
Yep. And that really tracks actually with the interviews. So some of you in this group were like interviewed or conducted interviews, and time again in the interviews for the video, people said like, I didn't actually know what was out there. I didn't know.
And this kind of raises something too that I'm side note pocket or parking lot this when it comes to the 14th on the discussion. If somebody can remember to add this to our bigger discussion. I did not know that there were resources available until I became an algorithm of back-to-back 5150 cases in our system. And that's how I found out that there was access, that there was resources available.
Okay.
So
yep.
Yeah, I think like, if I was a college student and I had access to this material, it probably would have not ended in a 5150 case, right? If I was, wherever I was at a grocery store, and I would have known that 211 existed, then I might not have become homeless. I don't know, but I actually had to end up in an algorithm before I got help.
So part of what you just said, Joe, made me think about related, like changing it to experiencing or at risk of, because we have all these people that are seeking maybe prevention services, and that part is still kind of fuzzy for people. So broadening that a little bit.
So I
access to services.
Yeah, I think that accessing services is extraordinarily important. And the reason why I think that that's important is because we are according to what I've read in the NOFOs and that sort of thing, we're a housing first organization, right? Housing first. And so, but we also know that psychologically, I mean, if we were to do polls and to do studies on this. We know that those people who are homeless, those people who are newly homeless, are more motivated to access services and become in order to mitigate their homelessness, as opposed to those who have been homeless longer. I'm not saying, and I'm speaking in general terms, and I know that there are, of course, there are outliers and there are individual circumstances and situations, but most likely those people who are newly homeless are more motivated to access and receive the services. So it's a matter of understanding where the services are. Like Jamie said, when I did both of my interviews, both of my people said they didn't know how to access, or they didn't know where to get the information. And I believe that if they had known where to get the information, then it would have changed the circumstances at least a little bit. So I think it's really important that we get the information out there. And so that sort of means that we have to be upstream we have to be proactive along with being reactive. We have to sort of balance between being proactive and reactive.
And I'll reframe a little bit where I would stay away from motivation and rather say the longer someone is homeless, the more trauma they're experiencing and the harder it is to then engage in, getting your documents ready and that whole long process that it can take to get through our system. So timing of our interventions is so critical. The faster we can get someone to end their episode of homelessness, the better off everyone is.
This conversation about domestic violence and human trafficking inside of the chat, there's this okay, so I'm envisioning downtown Antioch where we have this public restrooms, and a lot of the times they're vandalized. A lot of the times, people are doing drugs in them, and I just wonder if like a setting like that, where you would have a flyer of, because people who are chronically homeless, people who are out there, we're in dire straits. There is no hope when you're chronically homeless. There's no, like a positive message, just a simple positive message can go a long way. And that's kind of what made me think of having them in public restrooms. And when we are sharing these resources, having that humanitarian message with it too, of identifying the shame, or identifying, like all of the things that come with the psychological headaches of being homeless, and the shame and the heartache and trying to get back on your feet and just trying to feel good about yourself again. Like those are the things that we need reminders of while we're surviving in public restrooms and the such.
Thank you, Joe. Just gonna look in the chat. Yes. So I'm just taking notes around a lot of the stuff that's coming up. Like this won't necessarily go in our work plan, but we're going to bring it back when we get into these conversations, because there's treasures in here. How do folks feel about stopping here? And we will have a shinier, cleaner version for you guys for the December. Hold on, I think it's the 13th. Whew, I'm at the end of my calendar. Yes, December 13th. And that's where we're gonna hopefully like kind of put a bow on it and get it ready for prime time. Yes, Rachel.
Okay, well, I'm gonna do my little advertisement for you.
Excellent, and I'll be right back.
Okay, so the American Library Association Social Responsibilities Roundtable, which I'm involved in, we are we have organized a summit, free summit, nothing to do with having to be an American Library Association member or a librarian or anything like that. And the summit is on homelessness in public libraries from a social justice perspective. And it is taking place next Monday, November 14th, most of the day. There is such an incredibly dynamic slate of speakers. I get very excited, and it's basically focusing on innovative partnerships, programming, and in-reach initiatives that they have launched to address the needs and uplift the experiences of vulnerable populations in communities across the country. So Jamie is going to speak about Contra Costa County, but we have people coming from really across the country, many of whom I've kind of met in my travels, and I'm really excited about all the different work that they're doing. So I'm going to drop like I said, completely free. I'm going to drop the link to the summit registration and schedule in the chat, and I'll also put my email there as well. You can reach out to me with any questions, but I would love it if you guys are able to join. And yes, I'm going to do that right now. So that's what I wanted to say.
Can I also ask if, I know Juno is a little under the weather, but if she wants to chime in at all, if she has any, 'cause I haven't heard her talk at all. If she's still there, or if she fell asleep.
She's not here.
I'm
Oh,
here.
there
Oh
she
no,
is.
you were
She
here.
is.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I was looking for Jay, and there's
No worries. Yeah, no, Joe's right. I've been a bit quiet today. I do I do have things I want to say. Gosh, I am a little bit flustered. I'm gonna take a moment to gather my thoughts.
I just had to call her out. I was like, she hasn't talked. That's it. Nope. There's something there.
yes. And take your time, Juno. You can put it in the chat. You can email Saul later, whatever is going to work for you.
And while you're thinking on it, one to bring something to the group just to hear thoughts on it, but the oversight committee was wondering if this group would be interested in taking a look at the COC complaint policy, and just taking a review of it, discussing any sort of improvements that could be made to it. We've kind of had a good chunk of time operating under this new policy. I think we're almost at a full year, and wanting to see if there's room for improvement and process on all that. And we were hoping to bring that to the next committee meeting in December, but wanted to make sure that that was of interest to this group and everyone had room to kind of agree to that.
I said, Joe, do a thumbs up.
And so will you provide the material before
Yep.
our December meeting, and then we'll discuss that in December?
Yep. Maddie's
Cool.
working on some red line edits. She'll share that with you.
Yeah, that's great.
Yep.
So
That's
the
great.
complaint process in the context of,
So the COC complaint process is the process by which folks who are accessing services within our system of care, after going through kind of the internal process, if they're having an issue at a shelter or housing provider and that can't be resolved, they bring it to the COC and say, hey, I'm having this issue with this provider. And then, we go through the process of if trying to do some conflict resolution or some resolution setting. If things need to proceed, they go to a panel that can request additional information and all of that, who puts forward another kind of resolution recommendation. And that's kind of an avenue for folks to lift their grievances higher than any one individual provider. And I think we've got some experience under our belt operating it now. So yeah.
I was going to say too, I think it was just a few months ago, there was a complaint that came through the system that I was part of.
Yeah.
And so from that process of getting the material from that complaint, having the conversation and then coming up with a solution, like there were so many things that I was just like, oh my goodness, this needs to get looked at. So I'm excited about this now that I've seen that duality there. So it'll be good.
Great.
yeah, I'm in.
Great.
I'm getting,
And this equity meeting, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I'm doing a lot of hustle and bustle, and I get to go to the Leisure Center in about 2 hours.
Nice.
Meet LeVar Burton in person, so I'm getting dressed to do.
Awesome.
Anyway,
That sounds fun.
that's why I'm hustling and bustling.
Joe,
Is
we're gonna add
this-
something.
Yeah, is this committee meeting, it is open to the public, right?
Mhm.
Yep.
Can we get access to this meeting? There is a thing that Jamie has shared, Jamie J, about the clicking on the boxes and you can sign up for certain meetings. Is
Mhm.
this meeting part of that list?
Yep.
Can you share that list in the chat so I can get access to
Yeah.
it? Because I can't seem
Oh.
to find that list
Yes.
every
Let me
time I
show
look
you.
for it.
I'm actually going to show you guys real quickly. Actually, this will be like a moment for me to do one of my nerdy. Here's how you navigate. Okay, so the way that we usually do it is we're like, hey, you want to update your mailing list? You go, I usually will send it's at the bottom of every of my emails. It says like, if you want to update your meeting preferences or sign up for a mailing list, click here. What that will take you to is a page that looks like this. And if you already have a entry, that's fine. It won't like make a separate one for you because it tracks it by email. But basically you would fill this out, and then down here, and let me see if I can make this bigger. Hold on. Too many controls here. Zoom. So you can see there's all these lists. So there's like information, but then there's meetings. So there's meetings, COC Learning Hubs, meetings, committee, equity. That's us. Meetings, committee, funding, governments. So basically, if you click on that, then when those meeting announcements come out, then you will get that directly in your inbox. I'm also including these in our like quarterly or monthly newsletters, but this is where we list all of those meetings.
And Jamie, when you're updating your information, do you need to check off everything that you're still interested in? Like if you only check off one thing, will it overwrite and only sign you up for that one thing?
You know what? That's such a good question. I don't know. I'll test that with myself. I don't think so. I think it just adds them. But also if it's easier for you, just tell me, like you can go on that page and say like, hey, I just want to make sure I'm on blah, blah list. And I can just go in manually and do that for you, which is probably a lot easier. But that's how you see the whole list of all the mailing lists.
I love that you made it clear that it was in your signature, because now that I know
Yeah.
that, I'm going to be using that link all
Good.
the time.
Yes.
All the time.
Tell all your friends. Please
I love
tell
that
all
it's
your
there.
friends.
That's great.
Yep. And again, like if you ever like, I don't know what list I'm on, I'm getting things I don't want or I'm not getting things I do want, we can just quickly pop on and I can fix it for you, or we can look and see what your preferences are. Because really we have like
Oh, yeah, maybe
30
I mean,
lists
personally,
now.
I should probably look at that, see which ones are I'm in there
I can do that
one of
with
these
you.
days.
Yeah, no problem. I can do that with
Cool.
you. Anything else?
Make sure you go drop off your ballot if you
I
haven't
know.
yet.
No.
Close at
I
8.
voted Saturday.
Oh, great.
Yay.
Great.
I'm sorry, Rachel. Good luck. Children.
Thank
Never a
you.
dull moment.
Yes, going to do it. You too. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I think we're good. Hopefully everybody has this meeting in their calendar. I'm gonna make sure, Teresa, that you're on this mailing list so you get information about this meeting. Hopefully we're gonna see all of you on Monday, the 14th, either virtually or in person, because Kiva and Joe and Juno and a bunch of folks from our team are gonna be shining bright. Very excited. Any last
You know what's
stuff?
funny
Oh, yeah,
about
go ahead.
that shine bright like a diamond, shine bright like a diamond. Diamonds don't shine, they reflect. So, right? Like, I just want to say that we reflect like a diamond.
I appreciate that. Yes, Juno, I hope you feel better. I feel you. There's crud. We've had it in my house. It's exhausting. Okay. I think you're gonna
Thanks,
get a little bit
everybody.
of time back. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.
I appreciate these
Hey, everybody.
conversations.